Remember some people who want to get attention or become famous by doing extreme things on the internet? Well, I guess people still do. There was once a college student in Mexico who decided to do an extreme yoga pose off her 80-foot balcony. Cool, huh? Oh, but she fell off the 6th floor and broke both her legs and suffered her arms, hips, and head. But it was all for the gram, right? Or, how about this guy who wanted to update the internet world about how drinking contents from a snow globe went? I think it was more than just a little tummy ache afterwards. Or, how about the dozens, hundreds, thousands of brave pioneers who took the Tide Pod Challenge for the 15 seconds of fame and to let us know that your body is not a washing machine. Being remembered for something can make or break a potential future for you. Like, how rough would it be if you were remembered in high school for peeing your pants?
Everybody my age pees their pants. It's the coolest.
Or mispronouncing some words during a church sermon.
Lot chose to go pinch his tits. Excuse me.
Ouch. What's even crazier is that there are characters in the Bible who are read about, known, and remembered for some of their actions. Some are good, and some are just not so good. And that's what this collection of talk is all about. Learning from people's victories and learning from people's failures. Now, how crazy would it be for a character in the Bible to be remembered for something good or bad, thousands of years later, and we're still reading about it? That's what happened to a particular character. He was called by God and destined for an incredible purpose. But instead of thinking with his head, he kept thinking with his. This is a story about a guy named Samson who had really long hair. Hey, I'm Samson. And also a story about a girl named Delilah who also had really long hair. Hey, I'm Delilah. Israel prayed and prayed to God to send them a deliverer and a protector. And just like God's fashion, he picks the most under the radar family who couldn't have any kids, saying, hey, you're going to give birth to Israel's hero. I'll bless him with these gifts and talents, but you must commit to not doing these 3 things. You cannot touch anything dead. Do it. You cannot drink wine, and you cannot cut your hair. To whom much is given, much is required. With great power comes great responsibility. Oh, that's really good. I'm gonna write this one down actually. So called by God, purposed by God, but slowly making negative compromising decisions that leads to his downfall. How could anyone take out Samson? He had supernatural strength. Well, we'll take a look and see how Samson caused his own downfall. A man who thought would never be bound up is now seen helpless in shackles. So when I was 15 years old, I was a babysitter. I took care of my neighbor's kids, and they had 3 children, Dylan and 2 girl twins, Katie and Kelsey. They were sweet and adorable. Loved those guys. And they each had their own thing. And Dylan had basketball. He was a sports guy. Katie and Kelsey are twins. Katie was a dancer, and Kelsey had piano. And now every time I would take care of them, I would, see what they're doing, what they're up to. Sometimes I'll pick them up from games. Sometimes I will just kind of sit through whatever they're practicing. And Kelsey was a piano player. And so oftentimes when I would babysit them at their home, they would be practicing, or Kelsey would be practicing the piano. And I remember one time, Kelsey had this piano recital coming up. And so she would start practicing, and then while I was babysitting, I would hear the piano quite often, okay? And so she's practicing simple chords, really easy, and so she's preparing for this recital, right? So let's say it's on, nice. She would practice a song, okay, so simple chords right there. I don't know if that's a song, but I just did whatever here. But while she's practicing, she would play this chord. So this is, for example, a C chord, okay? And she would practice. And then one time, she actually missed a key. So for example, instead of hearing this, she played this. Do you see the difference there? So this is C, then she played this. Now, you can hear the difference, but over the course of time, that sound just kind of got used to her. She kept making the same mistake, and that wrong note just became normal to her. And so for her entire time of practicing those chord progressions, she just got used to how the wrong note sounded. It just became so natural to her. And so when she got to the recital, and she's playing it, and it's great, and it's adorable, but that one note was totally off key, and the whole crowd knew it, but she didn't, because that mistake that she made just kind of became accustomed to her practicing routine and never really dealt with the finger position issue. If there's something I've learned in my walk with God, there's a few things I've learned in my walk with Jesus. And if you're new to the project, we believe in the Bible, and following Jesus is the best decision that you can ever make in your life. And over the course of some years that I've been following Jesus, one thing I've learned very specifically is that you just don't get wiped out. We believe in Jesus, but we also believe that there's an enemy out there. There are some things going against you. But as a Christian, as a believer, you don't just get wiped out. You don't just finish. You don't just fail all of a sudden and be totally left strandless. Downfalls for most people don't happen overnight. They happen over time. They don't happen over one course of action. They happen over multiple small actions. Like if I were to sweep dirt under the rug, the first and second time, sure, I'm lazy, but no one will know. But if I keep sweeping the dirt under the rug time and time and time again, I don't know who you are or where you live, but at one point or another, your house is going to become unbreathable. And that's kind of the story we see here with Samson, this Bible character that we were taking a look at over the course of this series. Now, if you are joining us or you missed last week, we started a brand new series called Heroes and Zeros. And the purpose of it is to take a look at what we can learn from people's victories and the good things and accomplishments, but also learn from leaders and Bible characters and about their downfalls and their failures. And tonight, I want to take a look at a guy named Samson. Samson is a person that if you grew up in church, you probably know about him or heard him in the Sunday school stories, but his story is actually really quite intense. And although we know about his story, we're going to kind of unpack his life a little bit and understand why he ended up the way he did. Now, just before I read from the Bible, just a little bit of context. Israel was against a rival country called Philistia, which are the Philistines. And every time, or a lot of times, they would go into wars and battles, and Israel would eventually lose because they kept being disobedient to God. And then so Israel is praying for years and years and years for God to send a deliverer, a protector that would take care and rescue Israel. And God does. And he does it in a really cool fashion, just the way God does. And he enters and approaches this couple who cannot have a kid. And God approaches them and says, hey, you're going to have a baby. But not just any baby. This baby will be Israel's hero. This will be Israel's rescuer and deliverer and protector. And he will have these supernatural abilities. He'll be huge, he'll be strong, and he'll have strength that will come from God. But he gives the parents three quick things, three conditions for Samson. He cannot touch anything dead, he cannot drink wine, and he cannot cut his hair. I don't know why he chose that, but God makes that condition to the family as if that this needs to be this perfect balance. And that perfect balance isn't anything special or out there. It's essentially giving a picture of Samson, you got to depend on me. You're going to have this enormous strength and abilities, but overall, you have to depend on me. And so as we're going towards this, we are in a part of the story where Samson has grown up. He's an adult. He just finished killing 1,000 men. Yeah, I know, it's just mind-boggling. Philistine men, to be specific, and that's important to know because Philistine men are armed and trained for battle, and Samson, because of his supernatural strength from God, decides, hey, I'm going to protect Israel, and he just kills off 1,000 men just all by himself. And so the Philistines are mad, they're pissed, they're trying to figure out, how do we take down Samson? And so instead of sending more men, instead, they send a woman. Instead of sending soldiers, they send a spy. And it would give the spy a huge amount of money if she would figure out Samson's secret. And we'll know very quickly through Samson's life is that the dude he's a narcissist. He gives in to sex and sleeping with women. So women is his weak spot. And here we are in Judges chapter 16, and Delilah has entered his life. That's her name, Delilah. And she is a spy. She is there to coerce Samson, to try and bring down his guard and figure out his secret. And this is where the Bible starts in chapter 16, verses 16. So this is what it says, and it's right behind me here. She tormented him with her nagging day after day until he was sick to death of it. Women, right? Finally, I'm just kidding. Calm down. Finally, Samson shared a secret with her. My hair has never been cut, he confessed, for I was dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as anyone else. So Delilah realized he had finally told her the truth. So she sent for the Philistine rulers. Come back one more time, she said, for he has finally told me his secret. So the Philistine rulers returned with the money in their hands. Delilah lulled Samson to sleep with his head in her lap, and then she called in a man to shave off the 7 locks of his hair. In this way, she began to bring him down, and his strength left him. Then she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. When he woke up, listen to this, he thought, I will do as before and just shake myself free. But he didn't realize that the Lord had left him. So the Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes. I know, it's really gory. They took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains and forced to grind grain in the prison. If you're here for Abby's message last week, Abby's was just so beautiful and like picturesque. This is just brutal, gory stuff. But even though this is a gruesome story, it's not meant to discuss or throw people off, but it's meant to be a cautionary tale. It's meant for us to look at Samson's life and what happened to him, and in turn for us to read it and allow us to live a little more wisely. And there's a bunch of things that we can learn from him, and we'll take a look at that. And so what we just read right here in the Bible is undoubtedly the worst day of Samson's life. The worst day. Imagine every day that you would just flex and God's power would just ripple through you and into the whole area. But on this day, you would think that it's just any other day where you would just fight off your enemy. But you didn't realize that all of a sudden you are left helpless. No power of God on you. Before he knows it, he's clubbed in the head, wakes up in a prison, not only to find out seeing darkness, not because he's blindfolded, but his eyes are literally taken out. A man who thought he would never be bound up is now seen helpless in shackles. And now the story is a little bit disturbing, and it's meant to be that way just a little bit to fill us with a little bit of unease. That it would be this cautionary tale and give us this new perspective. And the number one question when we would just read this story is, how can he be so foolish? How could he just willingly just give up his secret to someone else? And for me, when I read this story, especially for the first time, and as I was studying this text, I find myself just kind of throwing myself into the story. I like to get myself enveloped into the story, and I'm reading this, and I'm looking at Samson, and the question that comes to my mind is like, Samson, how could you do that? The girl is not right for you. She is poison. Samson, you're stupid. Why would you do that? And that's me as a reader. He was born with a supernatural strength, and now he's tied up in prison, helpless. The question for us to think about and as begged is, how can a man start off so well but end up so badly? But tonight for us, I think a better question to ask is, how can we avoid such a thing? Because we're reading the story, and this is a historical account, and this is the Bible recording history. And so this is in real time, a real story. But there are some things that we can learn from Samson's life. How can we avoid this? And how can we make his story not our story? Now, a man as powerful as Samson couldn't have been bound up by chains just like that. We have to take a look back on Samson's life and see how everything led up to this moment, okay? And so the first thing that we notice about Samson's life is that it all starts with a small compromise. That's all it takes. It all started with one small compromise. You see him, when we're reading this text, it's him laying his head down on the lap of a prostitute, telling her his secrets that was only meant between him and God. But that's not how it began. It started with this little bitty gray area. Well, Ruben, where do you see that? Well, let's take a look a little bit of his life. We'll just back it up a little bit in the Bible. And this is what it says in Judges 14:5. Okay? So it says, this is now Samson before this event happened. This is early on in his life. And it says as Samson and his parents were going down to Timnah, a young lion suddenly attacked Samson near the vineyards of Timnah. Now, although seeing a lion come out, that's really great and all, but I'm actually focused on the last few words, that he was there at the vineyards of Timnah. I don't know if you were catching me before at the beginning of the message on what the 3 conditions were. You can't touch anything dead, you can't cut your hair, and you can't drink wine. So tell me, why is someone who's not supposed to drink be in a wine vineyard? That's mind-boggling for me. Like, what is the excuse Samson's going to bring up to justify his reasoning? I love the smell of grapes. I love the vines. I love the fermentation process. Shut up. That's a dumb decision. Why are you there and why is he doing that? Like, if you're on a diet, you're not going to go just hang out at a buffet. This is right there for you. Do you see what's going on here? There are plenty of other ways to go for a stroll. There are plenty of other ways to get back home. You don't have to go through a vineyard if you're specifically told you cannot drink wine. Do you see how that decision is not smart? It's just a dumb decision. And Samson, what are you surrounding yourself with? See, it's a small compromise. Well, I'm technically not drinking anything. No. That small compromise could lead to something else. And that other thing could lead to something else. And so on and so forth. And before you know it, you're on the slippery slope. Snowball is caught and it's just now creating this avalanche of bad decisions. And now you're in this downward spiral going south. Well, I'm not going to drink wine. I just want to be around it. And so many of us play that game that we're just going to hang out in the gray areas and justify it and then realize down our lives, our walks with God has been deviated. And I get this question all the time as a pastor. Well, Pastor Ruben, like, I'm not sleeping with my girlfriend or my boyfriend, but how far can I go? Or now that weed is legal, can Christians smoke weed? Or I'm hanging out at the frat parties, but trust me, don't worry, I'm not getting drunk. Or yeah, I see nudity all the time on Netflix, but at least I'm not on Pornhub. Like, the only thing I could tell you is that, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And where we start to hang around the small compromises and the gray areas, we will see that it will make it a lot harder for us to live a life with God because we're just continually making the mistakes. We need to completely remove those things so we just don't go the wrong way. And that's important for us to learn and understand because there are a lot of gray areas in this world. By the way, I forgot to preface at the beginning of the message that this one's a little tougher to swallow, this message. We have the liberty to do a lot of things, guys. You can do it. I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to prohibit you, I'm not going to forbid you to do something. You can do it. You have the liberty. You have the freedom. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. And there are a lot of things in this world that we have the liberty to partake, but it wouldn't necessarily be an advantage or help us in the long run. And so there are people, there are situations, there are temptations out there that are going to make it a lot harder for us if we just keep hanging around those things, hanging around those mistakes, hanging around those small compromises. His small compromise continues. Check it out in verse 8. Later, when he returned to Timnah, you see, he's just going back to the vineyard. This kid's just as smart as a box of rocks. He turned off the path and he looked at the carcass of a lion. And he found that a swarm of bees had made some honey in the carcass. Carcass meaning it's a dead thing. Follow me? He scooped some of the honey out and gave it to his hands and ate it along the way. He also gave some to his father and mother, and they ate it, but he didn't tell them where he got the honey from, even though it was from the carcass of a lion. Maybe I can get some honey without getting some of the dead on me. Do you see how he's playing with fire here? And maybe I'll just get a stick and toy with it, and He's just inches away from making a horrifying decision that will not only affect his life, but also affect the people. He's he's Israel's hero, rescuer, deliverer. That decision doesn't only affect him, it affects other people too. And the same with us as well. Like, our lives, you may not think that we could be hurting or deviating other people, but you never know what could happen in terms of our platform of influence, our friendship circles, our family. All in all, there are other places to get honey. Didn't tell his parents. The Bible says didn't tell his parents. Of course, because his baby mama would have slapped him in the head. It says, Samson, come on, man. You are special. You have the call of God in your life. You are a unique person. You are Israel's hero. How could you do such a thing? You have such a responsibility. Keep up with it. Don't stray away with these small compromises and these gray areas. Let me ask you a question. What is there in your life that you're just not telling people about? And this is more towards, if you accepted Christ, you are a Christ follower, you've made church your community, but we all go through some stuff. And I understand, and I've been there, done that, and I still go through some stuff as well. But what are some things in your life that you're not telling people about who are for you? We keep kind of like beating around the bush. Where were you? Just out. What were you doing? Just things. How are you doing? It's fine. You see how evasive that is? And it takes a Christ follower to differentiate the boys and girls to the men and women of faith in our spiritual journeys. That is it. It's to not be evasive with the things that we're tempted about, but to be open and honest and let that out, because in the book of James in the New Testament, it says when we confess to our friends, when we confess to our inner circle, our community, there is healing. But a lot of us just want to settle with just salvation. And that's great and all, but we want to mature, we want to grow in our faith, we want to learn more about God, and this is the way how. So let me get as close as I can without getting some of the dead touching me. I'm going to get as close to the vineyard without drinking. Samson's goal was to get as close to the thing without giving in. Well, that's a dangerous thing that a small compromise is, because the second point is that it will always lead to slowly being desensitized. Small compromise will slowly lead to slowly being desensitized. Happens very slowly, one small compromise at a time, until time passes. Take a look what it says in Judges chapter 16, verse 1. One day, Samson went to the Philistine town of Gaza and spent a night with a prostitute. Whoa, hold up. That escalated quickly. Like he's just chilling and sleeping with prostitutes now? But take a look at the verse right before it, okay? It'll be on the screen. Judges 15, verse 20, I believe. It says, Samson judged Israel for 20 years during the period when the Philistines dominated the land. And so in the Bible, just to give you a heads up, especially when we're referencing history, sometimes the next verse or at a turn of a page, we can see just decades of time passing by. And so we think to ourselves, that escalated. Well, Samson, all of a sudden slept with a prostitute. How? 20 years of small compromises. Touching dead things, almost. Drinking, almost. But now all of a sudden these small compromises in these gray areas have now calloused his heart. It's become hard. It's desensitized. Now you and I can say, I will never do that. Whoa. You and I would be kidding ourselves if we were not in this position in 20 years. In 20 years, we could do amazing things for God. You have the potential to just change lives. But also in 20 years, if we're not careful, we can almost not recognize our walks with God. That's what 20 years will do. Samson's not the only one where God spoke great things over. Every baby here, every baby in this world, you included in this room, you young adults, every baby that is born in this world is born with a heaven-sized potential. There are dreams in their hearts that God is hoping it will become a reality. There's potential, listen to me, university students, young professionals, those who are working, those who are married in relationships and single. Everyone here, listen to me. There is a God-sized potential on your life. And any potential that does not become a reality becomes a tragedy. And the way we miss our mark for our lives is that, the way we miss it is that we just make one small compromise after another. And then eventually, we just get desensitized. You ever been in, you just jump into a hot tub that's just like way too hot? It's like, But when you're in that hot tub for a while, you get used to it. Why? It's because you slowly become acclimated to it. You become what you are in. And that's the way it works, is that's the deceitfulness of a small compromise. Oh, that little thing? No, that's not a big deal. No, it's not. It could very well be a big deal, because that little thing will lead to the next, and that thing will lead to the next. I remember when I was just being really honest and vulnerable with you guys, so this is a safe place and we can do that. I remember when I was 11 years old, I was exposed to pornography for the first time. And it was my uncle, out of all people, who kind of like forced me to watch it. And at first I was like, whoa, what is that? And like, you're 11 years old, you're like, what is this? It's gross. And then, you start to hit puberty. You start looking at girls differently, or boys differently. And boys, you're going through puberty and you're realizing there's some the things happening here. It's like, whoa, what's going on? And slowly, these kind of like sexual thoughts and perversion that I first saw on pornography, and it drew me back towards it. And, I'll watch a clip like once a week, and slowly turn to more and more of that, and more of that. And all of a sudden, before I knew it, I was just completely addicted. And I accepted Christ when I was 17 years old, and less than 2 years later, I felt God call in my life that I was supposed to be a pastor and work in a church, and what that looked like specifically, I don't know. But all I knew is that my first step is I wanted to go to Bible college. I needed to go to Bible college. And that Bible college year was really hard, guys. Like, they would put like this software up in computers that would, prohibit you from watching those things. But my addiction was so strong that I found ways around it. And even in the midst of Bible college, my very first year, I was still dealing with pornography. And I remember one time towards the end of the school year, I had this chapel, and some person was preaching and talking, and he's talking about something called secret sin, stuff that's in your life that you're not telling people about, and how it can just ruin you. It can rot you to the core. Yes, there are physical implications, but also in a spiritual sense, it could just ruin you and deviate your walks with God. And I remember at that moment, I just broke down crying. Like, I was on the front and I was like, I'm not worthy. I am not meant to be a pastor. If I'm addicted to this thing, I am not worthy to lead other people as a pastor. And I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up. And after that freshman year, I stopped. I was going to re-sign to come back as a sophomore. But then the dean of my students, this incredible man, his name is Mark, he called me and said, hey, why aren't you coming back? And I explained to him the situation. He's like, I can't do this because of my problem. And he says, listen, I need you to come back, and I need you to meet with me once a week. I'm like, what is that going to do? He's like, well, at least it's going to hold you accountable. And so I did. I came back and I met with him once a week, and I'll tell you guys, it was a fight. It was me waking up with just fists in the air, like just trying to fight this thing. But with slow progression and consistency, after about a semester and a half, like I beat it. I was done and I was free, and I can talk to you today with my head clear and my thought patterns ready, totally in line, hopefully aligned with God because of what I had to do. But here's the thing. God will always give you a way of escape. But my heart became so hard that way of escape that God provided just became a blind spot. And so what I'm trying to say is, for you, it may look different. For you, it may look the same, actually. Maybe there's some people in this room that are going through the exact same thing I went through. Maybe it looks different. But what I'm trying to say is, friends, don't play that game. Don't play that game of how far away from God I can get, but still technically be with Him. How far can I get away from God, but still technically be with Him? That's not the life of a Christian. That's not the life of a Christ follower. That's not the question we should ask. The question we should ask is, how could I totally be immersed and abide with God? That my soul, because we're not just flesh and bones, we're soul first, that my soul would be in line with the God of the universe. Samson has so many times to get back on the right road, but he didn't. And one small compromise after another, boom, heart becomes calloused, slowly becomes desensitized. What started off with a small compromise grows to being desensitized. Then all of a sudden, Samson gets taken out. The Philistines got what they wanted. Taken out, imprisoned, eyes gouged out. And the Bible says that he was just grinding grain every single day. Instead of doing what God has called him to do, he's doing now something that's creating a hole in him. This is a tough pill to swallow, but listen and hear me out. When you ignore God's instruction, you also, as a byproduct, ignore his protection. I don't want to do my life on my own. I don't want to live averagely. I don't want to live this mediocre life. I want to, when I'm old and gray and looking back on my life, I want to see a stack of accomplishments rather than a stack of regrets. Being in God's plan, saying yes to Jesus every single day. I want to go to heaven, and I want God to see my life as a pleasure of my time here on earth. Now, the good thing about this story is that nobody, and I mean nobody, is too far gone. Not even for Samson. Not for you either. He was given a fresh start, and that's actually where his story ends. His story ends with beauty. It ends with excitement. It ends with humility. Because there in that prison, it took him losing his sight to see what was actually going on and to see God. God, at the beginning of this message, said, I said at the beginning of this message that this was the worst day of his life, but it actually turned around to be his best. Samson became broken, he was humbled, and started to pray again. And the Bible said that the hairs on his head started to grow back. Don't you love how God was still committed to Samson, even though Samson wasn't committed to God? And yes, the text said that God abandoned him, but he needed to pull back a little bit in order to come rushing in again. Sometimes God will just give you the space to make the mess in order for him to come in again and comfort you and make you whole. Sometimes that happens. And so towards the end of the chapter, we see one last battle where Samson doesn't just take out 1,000 Philistines. He takes out over 3,000 of them. Check out what it says in Judges 16:30. He prayed. Let me die with the Philistines. Then all of a sudden the temple crashed down on the Philistine rulers and all the people. So he killed more people when he died than he had during his entire lifetime. What an amazing rescue to his story here. And the premise of the story is that you are not too far gone. For those who are here, and if you are not a Christ follower, maybe you're just checking out the project, this is just all new to you. And I totally understand that. If you are here as a Christ follower, maybe you fall into this category. And I'm not here to shame anybody. I'm not here to force anybody or twist your hand or arm. I'm just here to let you know that whatever you have going on in your life, whatever you may think that I'm not worthy enough, I'm not good enough to do anything for God, I want to tell you you're wrong. You are not too far from God. And for some of us, our greatest moments can come after some of our greatest mistakes. But the story shows us that you don't always have to hit rock bottom in order to get that wake-up call. God's promise was evident on Samson's life throughout it all. And today, I want to tell you firsthand that God's promise is on your life. You are amazing, but you're not just amazing. That's a surface level emotion. You are full of purpose. You are birthed with potential. You're birthed with this heart that is meant to change others around you. And all I can say is that if we can get this right, Edmonton can't help but notice. Our city, our schools, our family, our friends, our work can't help but notice how we are so in tune with God that it causes them to wonder and ask, why? And it gives us that opportunity just to be an amazing light in a dark place. And so, I like to say God's promise is on you. My next question and my next statement is, it's up to you if you want it. It's up to you if you want to. Just walk in that and make that idea a reality. I want to pray for you. But after I pray, we're going to go into a moment of worship. And the songs we picked tonight is kind of going to be along this theme. And sometimes when we think to ourselves, there's a song called I Trust in God, and I feel it's perfect for right now because sometimes we feel like we're not worthy, and sometimes we don't believe that God will come through for us. But God has never dropped you. God has not stopped being faithful to you. It's us and our perspective that has shifted, and we've just kind of subconsciously isolated ourselves from either community and with God overall. But I would encourage you is that when we sing, when we worship, and for those who are new to the project and new to church, this is a moment for us through the medium of music, for us to just thank God. And it's just a response to God of what he did in our lives through the gospel with Jesus dying on that cross. It's a way for us to say thank you. There's no gifts, there's no things that we can say to totally repay God, but the Bible says that worship is the most beautiful gift that we can give God. And so if that's the case, I don't know about you, but I'd want to give that 110%. So I'm going to ask you to stand with me right now if you're able to, and I would love to pray for you, and we will just dive into just a few moments of worship. So God, we just thank you for our moments, and we thank you for our time together, and we thank you that the Bible is not just lame old stale book, but it is something that is still true and real and relevant today in our lives today. And I just pray over everyone today that whatever they're going through, wherever they are at, that Lord, you remind them that they are enough, that they are worthy, that they're packed full of purpose, and that they're just ripened with just love that is meant to exude onto other people. God, would our souls be aligned with you once again if it's not? So God, I pray protection over everyone. I pray blessing, and I pray, Lord, that we would just leave here in this place a different person. So in terms of worship, may we say thank you and respond back to you with just our hearts open to what you want to do in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray.